Alexandra Laurent never thought she'd end up begging the man she hated most in the world to save her. But there she sat in the lobby of Sterling Technologies, waiting to grovel at the feet of Adrian Sterling, the Ice King himself. Her hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap, trying to steady herself. The receptionist kept glancing at her with thinly veiled pity. She probably knew. Everyone in this industry probably knew by now. The Laurent family empire had fallen and fallen hard. 3 months ago, Alexandra was heir to Laurent Industries, one of the most respected names in tech development. She had corner offices, designer suits, and a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless. She was 28 years old and on top of the world. Now she wore a dress she'd owned for 3 years because she couldn't afford new clothes. Her father was in the hospital recovering from a heart attack. Their family home was in foreclosure. Her little sister Emma had to drop out of Stanford because they couldn't pay tuition. And her brother's medical treatment for his diabetes had been cut off because they'd lost their health insurance. They'd lost everything. The receptionist's phone buzzed. "Mr. Sterling will see you now, 70th floor." Alexandra stood up, smoothing her dress, trying to look like she had any dignity left. The elevator ride felt like descending into hell. Each floor that passed was another layer of her pride being stripped away. Adrian Sterling, just thinking his name made her jaw clench. They'd been rivals for 2 years, ever since he'd launched his company and started stealing their clients. He was a self-made billionaire, or so the stories went. Grew up in foster care, put himself through MIT, built his tech empire from nothing. The media loved him, the Ice King with the tragic backstory and the brilliant mind. Alexandra thought he was a cold-hearted bastard who crushed anyone in his way. And she told him that, to his face, multiple times, at industry conferences, at business dinners, at that charity gala where she may have thrown her drink at him after he made a comment about legacy children who inherit power they never earned. So yes, walking into his office to beg for help was basically her personal nightmare. The elevator doors opened. His assistant, a severe-looking woman in her 50s, gestured toward the massive double doors at the end of the hall. "He's expecting you." Alexandra walked down that hallway like she was walking to her execution. Her heels clicked against the marble floor. Each step felt heavier than the last. She pushed open the doors. Adrian's office was exactly what anyone would expect from a billionaire. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, minimalist design, everything black, white, and steel, cold, like him. He stood with his back to her, looking out at the skyline, hands in his pockets. He was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair and the kind of sharp, angular features that looked carved from ice. He wore a black suit that probably cost more than her family's mortgage payment. Everything about him screamed power and control. "Alexandra Laurent," he said without turning around, "this is unexpected. I need to talk to you." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "I assumed, otherwise you wouldn't be here." He finally turned to face her, and those cold gray eyes locked onto hers. "Please sit." It wasn't a request, it was a command. Alexandra sat in one of the chairs across from his desk. He moved around to his own chair, settling into it like a king on a throne. He didn't say anything, just looked at her, waiting. God, she hated him. "I'm here about my family," she started. "I'm aware of your family's situation. It's been all over the business news. Bankruptcy, asset seizure, quite the fall from grace." His tone was completely neutral, not sympathetic, not cruel, just observational. "I assume you're here to ask for money." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I'm here to ask for help." "Same thing." He leaned back in his chair, studying her like she was a specimen under a microscope. "How much do you need?" Alexandra had practiced this part. She'd written it down, calculated everything, rehearsed it 100 times. But sitting there, having to say the number out loud to him, felt like swallowing glass. $47 million. His expression didn't change. He didn't even blink. 47 million was probably pocket change to him. That covers the debts, your father's medical expenses, your siblings' needs. Yes, and some operating capital to restart a smaller version of the company. We'd pay you back with interest over 10 years. I have a business plan. He held up his hand, cutting her off. I'm not interested in a business plan. Your father's decision-making is what got you into this mess. Why would I trust him to run anything? Then I'll run it. Give me the money and I'll. No. The word hung in the air like a slap. No, she repeated. You haven't even heard my proposal. I don't need to hear it. I'm not giving you $47 million for a failed company run by a family that clearly doesn't know how to manage money. He stood up, walking back to the window. However, I am willing to help you, under different terms. Hope flared in her chest, painful and desperate. What terms? Marry me. Alexandra stared at his back. Surely she'd misheard. What? Marry me for 1 year. I'll pay off all your family's debts, cover your father's medical expenses indefinitely, restore your siblings' education funds, and give you a position in my company with a salary of $500,000 annually. At the end of the year, when we divorce, you'll receive a settlement of $10 million. Her mind went blank, then it started racing. This had to be a joke, some cruel game he was playing. Why would you want to marry me? You hate me. Hate is a strong word. I find you irritating. He turned back to face her. But I need a wife. Or rather, I need to appear to have a stable marriage. There's a deal I'm working on with some very conservative international investors. They don't trust playboys and bachelors. They want to see someone settled, responsible, family-oriented. So hire an actress. I considered it. But then you walked into my lobby this morning and I realized you're perfect. You're well known in the industry, respected despite your family's current situation. Our marriage would make sense to people, and more importantly, you're desperate enough to say yes. The cruelty of that last sentence hit her like a physical blow. You're enjoying this, she said quietly, watching me beg, having me at your mercy. Something flickered across his face, too quick to read. I'm offering you a solution to your problems. Whether I enjoy it or not is irrelevant. I can't just marry you. That's insane. It's a business arrangement. No different than any other contract. He walked back to his desk, pulled out a folder and slid it across to her. These are the terms. Read them. Take the contract to a lawyer if you want. You have 48 hours to decide. Alexandra opened the folder with trembling hands. Pages and pages of legal language, but certain phrases jumped out at her. Cohabitation required. Public appearances as a married couple. Exclusive relationship for the duration of the contract. Employment under Adrian Sterling for minimum 40 hours per week. You want me to live with you? Obviously, we need to appear to be a real couple. And work for you. You'll be my director of strategic development, a real position with real responsibilities. I don't pay people to do nothing. So I'd be your wife and your employee. For 1 year, then you walk away with $10 million and your family's debts cleared. You'd be free to start fresh. Do whatever you want. She looked up at him. He was watching her with those cold gray eyes, and she couldn't tell what he was thinking. Was this revenge for all the times she'd insulted him? Some twisted power play? Why me specifically? She asked. You could have any woman you wanted for this arrangement. But I don't want any woman, I want you. He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing a stock purchase. You're intelligent, well-spoken, know how to navigate high society. You won't embarrass me, and you need me enough that you'll actually follow through with the contract terms. You want someone you can control. I want someone who understands this is business, not romance. You hate me. I find you aggravating. That makes this simpler. No messy feelings to complicate things. Alexandra looked back down at the contract. $47 million in debts erased, her father's medical care covered, Emma back at Stanford, her brother's insulin paid for, the family legacy salvaged. All she had to do was sell herself to Adrian Sterling for 1 year. "I need to think about it," she whispered. "You have 48 hours. After that, the offer expires." He sat back down, picking up his phone. "My assistant will show you out." She stood up on shaky legs, clutching the folder. She was almost to the door when his voice stopped her. "Alexandra." She turned back. He was looking at her now with something she couldn't quite identify in his expression. "For what it's worth, I am sorry about your father. I hope he recovers." The unexpected kindness felt worse than his cruelty. She nodded once and left. Alexandra sat in her brother's hospital room that evening, the contract burning a hole in her bag. Her father was asleep in the bed, his face pale and gaunt. The heart attack had aged him 10 years in a matter of weeks. The monitors beeped steadily, a reminder of how fragile everything had become. Emma sat in the corner chair, her laptop open but untouched. At 20 years old, she should have been at Stanford, living in a dorm, worrying about finals and parties. Instead, she was here, watching their family crumble. "The hospital called again," Emma said quietly. "About the bills. They're threatening to move Dad to a state facility if we can't pay by Friday." Alexandra's stomach twisted. A state facility. Her father, who had built a tech empire from scratch, who had been featured in Forbes and Fortune, reduced to charity care. "I'm handling it," Alexandra said. "How, Alex, we're broke, more than broke, we're drowning." Emma's voice cracked. "And Marcus called. His insulin prescription ran out. He's rationing what he has left." Their younger brother, 22 years old and type 1 diabetic, rationing insulin because they couldn't afford his medication. Alexandra thought about the contract in her bag. $47 million. All their problems solved. All she had to do was marry Adrian Sterling. "I said I'm handling it," she repeated, more firmly this time. Emma looked at her, really looked at her, and Alexandra saw the moment her sister understood. "You found a way to get the money." "Maybe." "What did you do, Alex? What did you promise?" "Nothing I can't deliver." Alexandra stood up, grabbing her coat. "I need to go. Call me if Dad wakes up." She left before Emma could ask more questions. Back at the tiny apartment she now shared with her siblings, Alexandra spread the contract across the kitchen table. She'd read it 3 times already, but she read it again, looking for loopholes, for escape clauses, for anything that might give her some power in this arrangement. There was nothing. The contract was ironclad. Adrian Sterling's lawyers had made sure of that. She would live in his penthouse, work in his company, attend events as his wife, share his bed, the contract implied, though it didn't state it explicitly. For 1 year, she would belong to him completely. And at the end, she would walk away with $10 million and her freedom. If she could survive that long. Her phone rang. Unknown number. She almost didn't answer, but something made her pick up. "Ms. Laurent," Adrian's voice was cool and professional. "Have you made your decision?" "You said I had 48 hours. It's been 12. I'm impatient, and I suspect you've already decided. You just haven't admitted it to yourself yet." She hated that he was right. "This is insane. You know that, right? We hate each other." Which is precisely why this will work. No messy emotions, no unrealistic expectations, just a clean business transaction. "Nothing about this is clean." "No," he agreed, "but it's effective. Your family needs help. I need a wife. We can help each other." Alexandra looked at her father's hospital bills spread across the table, at Emma's tuition statements marked past due, at Marcus's medical records. "If I agree to this," she said slowly, "I need some changes to the contract." "I'm listening." "I want my own room, separate from yours." "No." "What do you mean, no?" "We need to appear to be a real couple. That means sharing a bedroom. My penthouse has security, staff, people who will notice if we're sleeping in separate rooms. It undermines the entire arrangement. Then get a bigger bed and stay on your side." There was a pause, then surprisingly, "Fine, anything else? I want my job title and responsibilities clearly defined. I'm not going to be your secretary or your assistant. If I'm working for you, I want real work." Already in the contract, Director of Strategic Development. You'll be overseeing 3 major projects and managing a team of 12. I told you, I don't pay people to do nothing. And I want the option to resign from the job if the marriage ends early for any reason. The marriage won't end early, but fine. I'll have my lawyers add that clause. Alexandra took a deep breath. One more thing. No one can know this is fake. Not my family, not yours, not anyone. If we're doing this, we're committing fully to the lie. Agreed. In fact, I insist on it. Any hint that this is a business arrangement will destroy its purpose. Then we need a story about how we got together. People will ask. They'll want to know how we went from rivals to married. Adrian was quiet for a moment. "We'll say it happened at the Morgan Charity Gala 3 months ago, after you threw your drink at me." "I apologized for that." "No, you didn't." "Well, I'm not apologizing now either." She heard what might have been a laugh, though with Adrian it was hard to tell. "We'll say the drink incident was the turning point, that we had a heated argument that turned into something else. Very enemies to lovers. People eat that up." "You've thought about this." "I think about everything, Alexandra. It's why I'm successful." She closed her eyes. This was really happening. She was really going to do this. "I need the money transferred for my father's medical care immediately, before the wedding. Non-negotiable." "Done. I'll have 5 million transferred to a medical trust for your father by tomorrow morning. The rest will be handled as outlined in the contract." 5 million, just like that, like it was nothing to him. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, I'll do it." "Excellent. I'll have my assistant send over the revised contract by morning. We'll need to move quickly. I want to be married within 2 weeks." 2 weeks, that's impossible." "Nothing is impossible with enough money. I've already spoken to a wedding planner. She'll contact you tomorrow. The wedding will be small but elegant. Immediate family only, plus key business associates. We'll announce the engagement tomorrow night at the Hartley Foundation dinner." "Tomorrow night? I'm not even going to that dinner." "You are now. I'll have a dress sent to you. Be ready by 7. My driver will pick you up." "You can't just." "I can and I am. You work for me now, Alexandra. Get used to it." He hung up before she could respond. Alexandra sat staring at her phone, her heart pounding. What had she just agreed to? She sold herself to her enemy. Agreed to marry a man who saw her as nothing more than a business asset. But when Emma came home an hour later, and Alexandra told her the hospital bills were paid, when Marcus called crying with relief that he could refill his insulin prescription, when her father's doctor called to say they were moving him to a private room with the best cardiac care team in the state, Alexandra knew she'd made the right choice, even if it destroyed her in the process. The next evening, a garment bag arrived at her apartment along with a team of hair and makeup professionals. The dress inside was stunning, a deep emerald silk that probably cost more than 3 months of her old salary. The shoes were Louboutin. The jewelry was real diamonds. Adrian Sterling didn't do anything halfway. By the time his driver arrived at 7, Alexandra barely recognized herself in the mirror. She looked like the woman she used to be, polished, powerful, like someone who belonged in Adrian Sterling's world. The lie was already beginning. The car ride to the event was quiet. Alexandra practiced her breathing, trying to calm her nerves. In less than an hour, they would announce their engagement. Everyone would know. There would be no going back. When they arrived at the venue, Adrian was waiting at the entrance. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look even more intimidating than usual. His gray eyes swept over her, assessing. "You look acceptable," he said. "You're a real charmer, you know that." "I'm not trying to charm you, I'm trying to marry you." He offered his arm, ready to become my fiancé. "Not even remotely." "Good, fake it anyway." They walked into the gala together, and Alexandra felt every eye in the room turn toward them. The whispers started immediately. Adrian Sterling and Alexandra Laurent, bitter rivals, arriving together, her hand on his arm, him leaning in to whisper something that made her smile, though inside she was dying. He was good at this, she realized. The performance. He played the attentive suitor perfectly, getting her champagne, introducing her to his business associates, keeping his hand on the small of her back in a way that was possessive but not inappropriate. "You're enjoying this," she murmured during a quiet moment. "I told you, I'm good at getting what I want." "And what do you want, Adrian? Really? Because I don't believe this is just about some business deal." His expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. "You'll figure it out eventually." Before she could ask what he meant, he led her to the center of the ballroom. The music quieted. People turned to watch. "Ladies and gentlemen," Adrian's voice carried across the room, "I have an announcement to make." Alexandra's heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the point of no return. Adrian turned to her, and for the cameras, for the crowd, he looked at her like she was the only person in the world. "3 months ago, this woman threw a drink in my face at a charity gala. I probably deserved it. We've been rivals for years, constantly at each other's throats. But somewhere between the arguments and the competition, something changed." He took her hand, and she forced herself not to pull away. "Alexandra Laurent has challenged me, frustrated me, and driven me absolutely insane. She's also brilliant, fierce, and unlike anyone I've ever met, which is why I asked her to marry me, and why she somehow said yes." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Cameras flashed. Alexandra felt like she might pass out. Adrian pulled a ring box from his pocket. Inside was a diamond so large it was almost obscene. He slipped it onto her finger, and the weight of it felt like a shackle. "To my beautiful fiancée," he said, and then he kissed her. It was their first kiss. Brief, chaste, appropriate for the public setting, but Alexandra felt it like an electric shock through her entire body. When he pulled away, he was smiling. To everyone else, it probably looked genuine, but Alexandra could see the cold calculation in his eyes. "Welcome to your new life, Mrs. Sterling," he whispered against her ear. "I hope you're ready for what comes next." The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of wedding preparations, contract signings, and carefully orchestrated public appearances. Alexandra moved through it all like a woman in a dream, or perhaps a nightmare she couldn't wake from. The wedding planner Adrian had hired was a fierce woman named Victoria who treated the event like a military operation. Dress fittings, venue selection, guest lists, catering menus. Everything had to be perfect. Everything had to look authentic. "People will be watching," Victoria said during one of their planning sessions. "Adrian Sterling doesn't do anything small. This wedding needs to convince everyone that this is real love, not a business arrangement." If only she knew the truth. Alexandra chose a wedding dress that was elegant but not too extravagant. Ivory silk with delicate lace details, simple and classic. She didn't want to look like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life, even though that's exactly what she was doing. Emma helped her through the fittings, asking questions Alexandra couldn't answer. "Are you sure about this? You barely know him. A month ago you hated him." "People change," Alexandra said, the lie tasting bitter on her tongue. "Do they, or are you just desperate?" Alexandra met her sister's eyes in the mirror. "Does it matter? Dad's getting the best medical care. You're going back to Stanford next semester. Marcus has his insulin. Isn't that what matters?" Emma looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just hugged Alexandra tightly and whispered, "I hope he's worth it." He was, but that wasn't the point. Adrian kept his distance during the planning phase. They communicated mostly through his assistant and occasional phone calls about logistics. He approved the venue, the guest list, the menu. He sent over documents for her to sign, contracts and financial agreements that bound them together legally and financially. The only time they saw each other in person was at mandatory public appearances, a dinner with his business partners, a charity auction, a photo shoot for a business magazine that wanted to cover their whirlwind romance. During the photo shoot, the photographer kept asking them to get closer, to look more intimate. Mr. Sterling put your arm around her waist. Ms. Laurent, lean into him. You're engaged, not business associates. Show me the love. Adrian's hand on her waist felt like ice even through the fabric of her dress. But they played their parts. They smiled. They gazed into each other's eyes. They looked like a couple in love. Perfect, the photographer gushed. The chemistry is incredible. You two are going to break the internet. If only he knew, they could barely stand to be in the same room. 3 days before the wedding, Adrian called her to his office. When Alexandra arrived, he was standing by the windows again, that same position from their first meeting, like he was surveying a kingdom he owned. "We need to discuss the living arrangements," he said without preamble. "You'll move into the penthouse the day after the wedding. I've had the master bedroom prepared with a king-sized bed, separate sides as you requested." "How generous of you." He turned to face her. "I'm also assigning you a personal assistant. Her name is Maya. She'll help you manage your schedule, handle any personal errands, and serve as a buffer when you need space from me." That surprised her. "You're giving me an assistant." "You're going to be my wife and a director at my company. You'll need the support. Maya is discreet and loyal. She knows this is a business arrangement." Alexandra's stomach dropped. "You told her." "She signed an NDA worth more than most people make in a lifetime. Your secret is safe." He walked to his desk and picked up a folder. "I've also had my lawyers draft a post-nuptial agreement, additional protections for both of us." The prenup wasn't enough. "The prenup protects my assets. This protects your dignity." He handed her the folder. "If I violate any of the terms of our original contract, if I'm unfaithful, if I'm cruel or abusive in any way, you can leave immediately with double the agreed settlement. 20 million instead of 10. She stared at the document. "Why would you agree to this?" "Because despite what you think of me, I'm not a monster. This arrangement is transactional, but that doesn't mean I intend to make you miserable." His gray eyes held hers. "I expect you to fulfill your obligations, but I won't trap you in an unbearable situation." "How thoughtful. You're really just a knight in shining armor, aren't you?" "I'm a businessman who believes in fair contracts." He sat on the edge of his desk. "We're going to be living together for a year, Alexandra, working together, appearing as a married couple. If we're going to survive this without destroying each other, we need ground rules." "I'm listening." Rule 1, in public, we're the perfect couple. Affectionate, attentive, believable. In private, we maintain professional distance unless circumstances require otherwise. Define, circumstances require otherwise. If we have guests, if staff are present, anytime someone might be watching. He paused. And there's one other circumstance we need to discuss. Alexandra waited, tension coiling in her stomach. Our marriage needs to appear real in every way. That means at some point, people will expect us to be seen as more than just business partners who happen to share a last name. There will be intimate moments required for the sake of appearances. You mean sex? I mean the appearance of intimacy. Actual sex is neither required nor expected, but we'll need to be comfortable with physical proximity, with touching, with creating the illusion that we share a bed in more than just the literal sense. Heat crept up Alexandra's neck. She hadn't let herself think about this aspect of the arrangement, the physical reality of being married to Adrian Sterling. So no sex, but we're going to what? Cuddle for the cameras. When necessary, yes. Can you handle that? Could she let this man touch her, knowing it meant nothing, knowing it was all a performance? I can handle anything for a year, she said. Good. Rule 2. We don't interfere in each other's personal lives outside of our public obligations. What I do with my free time is my business. What you do with yours is yours. As long as there are no scandals. Correct, no affairs, no public embarrassments. We both have too much to lose. Rule 3. Honesty within the bounds of this arrangement. If something isn't working, we discuss it. If there are problems, we address them before they become catastrophic. We're stuck with each other for 12 months. Let's not make it worse than it has to be. Alexandra considered this. It was more reasonable than she'd expected, more human. Agreed, she said finally. Anything else? Adrian stood, walking toward her until they were separated by only a few feet. Up close, she could see the faint lines around his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw. He was handsome in that cold, distant way, like a marble statue come to life. One more thing, he said quietly. I know you hate me. I know you're only doing this for your family. But for the next year, we're partners. We succeed together or we fail together. So whatever animosity you feel toward me, whatever resentment, I need you to put it aside when it matters. Can you do that? Alexandra thought about her father in his hospital bed, about Emma returning to Stanford, about Marcus with his insulin, about all the reasons she was doing this. Yes, she said, I can do that. Then we have a deal. He extended his hand. She shook it, his grip firm and cool. A business transaction sealed with a handshake, just like everything else between them. The wedding day arrived with cruel efficiency. Alexandra woke in her tiny apartment for the last time, staring at the ceiling, trying to comprehend that by the end of the day, she would be Mrs. Adrian Sterling. Emma helped her dress, her fingers trembling as she fastened the tiny buttons down Alexandra's back. You look beautiful, she whispered. I just wish you looked happy. I am happy, Alexandra lied. This is what I want. The ceremony was held at an exclusive estate outside the city. Only 50 guests, all carefully selected. Alexandra's family sat on one side, Adrian's business associates, and the few people he called friends on the other. There was no large crowd, no media circus. Just an intimate gathering that looked exactly like a wealthy couple's private celebration. Alexandra's father attended in a wheelchair, still weak but insisting on being there. He hugged her before the ceremony, tears in his eyes. I know this is fast, he said, but Adrian Sterling is a good man, powerful. He'll take care of you. If only he knew the truth, that his daughter had sold herself to save him. The ceremony itself passed in a haze. Alexandra walked down the aisle alone, her heels clicking on white marble. Adrian waited at the altar in a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his expression unreadable. When she reached him, he took her hand and his fingers were cold. The officiant spoke about love and commitment and partnership. Alexandra barely heard the words. She was too focused on keeping her breathing steady, on not letting her hands shake, on maintaining the facade. Do you, Adrian James Sterling, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? I do. Adrian slipped a platinum wedding band onto her finger, right next to the enormous engagement ring. Then she did the same for him, her hands trembling slightly. You may kiss the bride. Adrian's hands cupped her face gently, and for a moment something flickered in his gray eyes, something that looked almost like regret. Then his lips met hers, and the kiss was soft, careful, nothing like she'd expected. It lasted only a few seconds, but Alexandra felt it reverberate through her entire body. When they pulled apart, the small crowd applauded. They were married, legally bound, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling. The reception was elegant and restrained. Champagne toasts, a dinner of perfectly prepared courses, a single dance where Adrian held her like she was made of glass. Through it all, they played their parts flawlessly. The happy couple, the whirlwind romance that no one saw coming. But when Alexandra caught her reflection in one of the venue's mirrors, she barely recognized the woman staring back at her. The designer dress, the perfect hair, the massive rings weighing down her finger. She looked like someone else entirely. Maybe that was the point. Late in the evening, as the last guests departed, Adrian approached her. "The car is ready. We should go." "Go where?" "Home, our home." He said it without emotion, just a statement of fact. Right, the penthouse, where they would live together, sleep in the same bed, pretend to be husband and wife. The drive was silent. Alexandra stared out the window, watching the city lights blur past. Beside her, Adrian checked his phone, already back to work, as if this had been just another business meeting to check off his list. When they arrived at the penthouse, Adrian's driver helped them inside with her bags. The space was massive, modern, and cold, all glass and steel and sharp angles. It looked like a magazine spread, not a home. "Your assistant Maya already moved your clothes into the master bedroom," Adrian said, loosening his tie. "The closet on the left is yours. Bathroom access is shared, but there are separate vanities." "How domestic." He ignored the sarcasm. "I have an early meeting tomorrow, so I'll be up by 5. Try not to disturb me if you're still sleeping." "Wouldn't dream of it." They stood in the massive living room, and the reality of the situation crashed over Alexandra like a wave. This was her life now. This cold penthouse. This colder man. For the next 365 days. Adrian must have seen something in her expression because his voice softened slightly. "It gets easier. The pretending. Eventually it becomes second nature." "Is that supposed to be comforting?" "It's supposed to be honest." He headed toward the bedroom, then paused. "Welcome home, Alexandra." She watched him disappear down the hallway, leaving her alone in her golden cage. The first week of marriage was an exercise in careful avoidance. Alexandra and Adrian moved around each other like planets in orbit, sharing space, but never truly connecting. They slept in the same massive bed with what felt like an ocean between them. Adrian kept to his side religiously, often working on his laptop until late into the night, the glow of the screen the only light in the darkness. Alexandra would lie on her side, facing away from him, listening to the soft clicking of his keyboard and wondering how her life had come to this. Mornings were awkward and stilted. Adrian would wake at precisely 5 a.m., shower, dress in one of his identical black suits, and leave for the office by 6. Alexandra would wait until she heard the penthouse door close before getting up, grateful for the solitude. But the real challenge came at work. On Monday morning, Alexandra arrived at Sterling Technologies as the Director of Strategic Development. The news of her marriage to Adrian had spread through the company like wildfire, and every employee she passed stared at her with barely concealed curiosity. Maya, her new assistant, met her at the elevator. She was younger than Alexandra expected, maybe 25, with sharp eyes and an efficient demeanor. "Mrs. Sterling," Maya said, and Alexandra winced at the name. "Your office is ready. I've prepared briefings on your 3 primary projects and scheduled team introductions for this afternoon. Please call me Alexandra. Mr. Sterling prefers formality in the office." "I'm sure he does." Alexandra followed Maya down the hallway to a spacious corner office, not as large as Adrian's but impressive nonetheless. "And what does Mr. Sterling prefer I call him?" Maya's expression remained neutral. "In public, darling or Adrian. In private company settings, Mr. Sterling. In the boardroom, sir." "He actually makes people call him sir." "He's very particular about professional hierarchy." Alexandra sank into her desk chair, already exhausted. This is going to be a long year. I've prepared coffee, 2 sugars, light cream, correct. How did you know that? Mr. Sterling provided detailed notes about your preferences. Maya set a folder on the desk. He's very thorough. Of course he was. Adrian Sterling controlled everything, down to how his fake wife took her coffee. The morning was consumed by meetings. Alexandra met her team, 12 talented developers and strategists who looked at her with a mixture of respect and suspicion. They knew who she was, knew her reputation in the industry, but they also knew she was the boss's wife, and that complicated everything. I know what you're thinking, Alexandra said during the team meeting. That I got this position because of who I married, and maybe there's some truth to that, but I've been in this industry for 6 years. I've led successful projects, negotiated major deals, and I know what I'm doing. So I'm asking for a chance to prove myself. Judge me on my work, not my last name. One of the senior developers, a woman named Rachel, spoke up. What's your vision for the Nexus project? The previous director wanted to scrap it entirely. Alexandra had read the Nexus files that morning. It was a revolutionary AI integration platform that had been plagued by technical difficulties. I think scrapping it would be a mistake. The core concept is sound. We just need to rethink the implementation strategy. I'd like to review the code base and meet with the development team by end of week. Rachel nodded slowly, something like approval in her expression. I can arrange that. By the end of the meeting, Alexandra felt like she'd made a tiny bit of progress. These people might not trust her yet, but at least they were willing to give her a chance. At noon, Maya knocked on her door. Mr. Sterling has requested your presence for lunch, the executive dining room. Alexandra's stomach tightened. Did he say why? No, but several board members will be present. I believe it's a public appearance. Write the performance. Alexandra checked her reflection, smoothed her hair, and headed to the executive floor. The dining room was elegant and intimate, with only a dozen tables. Adrian sat at the center table with 3 older men in expensive suits. When Alexandra entered, he stood immediately, his face transforming into something warm and welcoming. Darling, he said, crossing to her and kissing her cheek. The gesture looked natural, effortless. I'm so glad you could join us. Of course, Alexandra replied, letting him guide her to the table with his hand on the small of her back. He introduced her to the board members, men who controlled billions in investments. Throughout the lunch, Adrian played the attentive husband perfectly. He asked about her morning, laughed at her comments, touched her hand across the table. To anyone watching, they looked like newlyweds still drunk on love. But Alexandra could see the calculation behind every gesture. This wasn't affection, it was strategy. Your wife is quite impressive, one of the board members said to Adrian. I've been reading about her work on the quantum project at Laurent Industries. Brilliant stuff. She's extraordinary, Adrian agreed, his gray eyes meeting Alexandra. I'm a lucky man. The words were pretty, but they meant nothing. Still, Alexandra smiled and played along because that was the agreement. After the board members left, Adrian's warm demeanor evaporated instantly. That went well. Henderson seemed particularly convinced. Glad I could be convincing. You did fine. He checked his watch. I have a conference call in 10 minutes. Dinner tonight at Marino's, 7 p.m., wear something elegant. We're meeting with the Tanaka executives. I don't remember agreeing to dinner. You agreed when you signed the contract. Public appearances are mandatory. Maya will send you the details. He left without another word, and Alexandra sat alone at the table, feeling like an employee who'd just been dismissed by her boss, which she supposed she was. The days blended together in an exhausting routine. Work during the day, where Alexandra threw herself into her projects with fierce determination. She was going to prove she earned this position, contract marriage or not. public appearances in the evenings, where she and Adrian performed their carefully choreographed romance for business associates and potential investors. And at night, they returned to the penthouse and became strangers again. By Friday evening, Alexandra was mentally and emotionally drained. She came home to find Adrian already there, which was unusual. He stood in the kitchen, tie loosened, pouring himself a scotch. "You're home early," she said. The Tokyo call was cancelled. He poured a second glass without asking and handed it to her. "You look exhausted." "Thanks, you really know how to compliment a woman." "I'm being observant, not critical." He leaned against the counter. "How was your first week?" "Exhausting, complicated. Everyone at the office treats me like either a threat or a curiosity." "Give it time. Once they see your work, they'll respect you." "You sound almost supportive." "I am supportive. Your success reflects on me." He took a sip of his scotch. "Besides, I looked at your preliminary report on the Nexus project. Your restructuring proposal is solid, better than anything the previous director suggested." Alexandra blinked. That might have been the first genuine compliment he'd ever given her. "Thank you." "Don't sound so surprised. I don't give you the position out of charity. You're actually qualified." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and Alexandra realized this was the first real conversation they'd had since the wedding. No performance, no audience, just two people talking. "This is weird," she said. "What is?" "This, us, talking like normal people instead of business associates or bitter enemies." Adrian's lips quirked in what might have been almost a smile. "We are business associates and bitter enemies, but I suppose we can be civil about it." "How generous of you." "I have my moments." He finished his scotch. "We have the Bennett Charity Gala tomorrow night. It's a major event. Lots of press, lots of important people. We need to be especially convincing." "Define especially convincing." "More physical affection than usual, dancing, perhaps some strategic displays of intimacy for the cameras." He met her eyes. "Can you handle that?" Alexandra thought about the contract, about the $20 million clause if he violated the terms, about the fact that in the grand scheme of what she'd agreed to, dancing and fake intimacy were relatively minor. "I can handle it." "Good, wear the black dress. The one from the wedding photo shoot. It photographs well." Of course he'd already planned her outfit. "Anything else, or are you going to tell me how to do my hair too?" "Actually, Maya scheduled you with my stylist at 3 p.m. tomorrow. She'll handle hair and makeup." Alexandra stared at him. "You're serious?" "I'm always serious." He rinsed his glass and headed toward the bedroom. "Get some rest, Alexandra. Tomorrow night is important." After he left, Alexandra stood alone in the massive kitchen, holding her untouched scotch and wondering how long she could maintain this facade before she lost herself completely. The next evening, after 3 hours with Adrian's stylist, Alexandra barely recognized herself again. The black dress hugged every curve, her hair was styled in elegant waves, and her makeup was flawless. She looked like she belonged on a red carpet. Adrian emerged from his closet in a tuxedo that probably cost more than most people's cars. His eyes swept over her, and for just a moment, something flickered in his expression. Something that looked almost like appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said. "You're required to say that." "I'm required to say you look acceptable. I chose to say beautiful." He picked up her wrap from the bed. "Shall we?" The gala was at a historic hotel downtown, the ballroom dripping with crystal chandeliers and old money. Photographers lined the entrance, shouting for attention as couples arrived. When Alexandra and Adrian stepped out of the car, the flashes were blinding. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Sterling, look this way. How does it feel to be married? Any honeymoon plans?" Adrian's arm wrapped around Alexandra's waist, pulling her close. "Married life is wonderful," he told the cameras with a smile that looked genuine. I'm the luckiest man alive." Then he leaned down and kissed her, and the cameras went crazy. It was their second kiss since the wedding, and unlike the chaste peck at the altar, this one lingered. His lips were soft, his hand firm on her waist. For a moment, Alexandra forgot it was fake, forgot about the cameras and the contract and everything else. When he pulled away, her heart was racing. "That was for the photographers," he murmured against her ear. "Try to look like you enjoyed it." "Right, the performance." She forced a smile as they walked inside. The evening proceeded like all their other public appearances, but more intense. Adrian kept her close all night, his hand never leaving her waist or her hand. They danced 3 times, and he held her like she was precious, his body moving with hers in perfect sync. "You're a good dancer," she said during the second dance. "Surprised?" "A little. I figured you were too busy calculating profit margins to learn social graces." "I'm full of surprises," he spun her smoothly. "You're good too. Where did you learn?" "My mother insisted on ballroom lessons when I was young. Said every proper young lady should know how to waltz." "Then I suppose I should thank your mother. This would be much more difficult if you had 2 left feet." Alexandra laughed despite herself, and Adrian's eyes crinkled slightly at the corners. For just a moment, the Ice King looked almost human. "There it is," he said quietly. "There what is?" "A real smile. You should do that more often." Before she could respond, a photographer approached. "Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, could we get a few shots for Society magazine?" They posed together, Adrian's arm around her shoulders, both of them smiling. The photographer directed them into various positions. Looking at each other, laughing at some unheard joke, Alexandra's hand on Adrian's chest. "Perfect," the photographer gushed. "You two are gorgeous together. The camera loves you." After the photographer left, Alexandra expected Adrian to release her, to return to his usual distance. But his arm stayed around her waist. "People are watching," he explained when she glanced at him questioningly. "We need to maintain the image." "Right, the image." They stood like that for a while, watching the crowd, and Alexandra became acutely aware of every point where their bodies touched. The warmth of his hand through the thin fabric of her dress, the solid presence of him beside her, the faint scent of his cologne, something expensive and understated. This was dangerous territory. She couldn't afford to think of Adrian Sterling as anything other than what he was, her boss, her contract husband, the man who owned her for the next year. But standing there in his arms, with music playing and champagne flowing, and everyone believing they were in love, it was getting harder to remember where the performance ended and reality began. 2 months into the marriage, Alexandra had settled into an uneasy rhythm. Work consumed her days, and she threw herself into it with almost desperate intensity. The Nexus project was progressing better than anyone expected, and her team had started to trust her judgment. She was proving herself, one decision at a time. But the nights were getting harder. Not because Adrian was cruel or demanding. In fact, it was the opposite. He was polite, respectful, careful to maintain the boundaries they'd established. They shared the bed like roommates, each staying on their designated side. They spoke only when necessary about schedules and appearances. It was the loneliness that was killing her. Alexandra had gone from having a family, a home, a life of her own, to this sterile existence where everything was controlled and calculated. She had no friends here, no one she could talk to honestly. Maya was helpful, but ultimately Adrian's employee first. Her own family believed the marriage was real, so she couldn't confide in them. She was utterly, completely alone. One Wednesday evening, she came home to find Adrian in the living room, which was unusual. He was typically locked in his home office until late. He sat on the couch with his laptop, papers spread across the coffee table. "Working from home?" she asked, setting down her bag. "The office internet went down. System-wide failure." He didn't look up from his screen. I needed to finish this proposal for tomorrow's board meeting. Alexandra headed to the kitchen, poured herself a glass of wine, and stood at the counter trying to decide what to do with her evening. She could go to her room, read a book, pretend this was normal. Or she could do something radical. "Have you eaten?" she called out. "No." "Want me to order something?" He looked up, surprised. "You don't have to do that. I'm ordering for myself anyway. It's not a big deal." "Then yes, thank you." They ate Thai food at opposite ends of the dining table, both working on their laptops, the silence broken only by the clicking of keys. It was pathetic, really. Two people pretending to be married, barely able to have a conversation. "How's the Tanaka deal progressing?" Alexandra asked, desperate to fill the void. "Slowly, they're cautious about American partnerships." Adrian glanced at her. "The gala photos helped. They appreciated seeing me settled with a wife. Glad I could be useful." "That came out wrong. I didn't mean—" He stopped himself, jaw tightening. "You're not just useful, Alexandra. You're an asset to this company. Your work on Nexus has been exceptional." "An asset? How romantic." "I'm not trying to be romantic. I'm trying to give you credit. You could try being human occasionally, just as an experiment." Adrian's eyes narrowed. "What do you want from me? I've given you everything I promised. Your family is taken care of. You have a good job, a comfortable home. What more do you want?" "A conversation." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I want to talk to someone. Anyone. I'm so tired of the silence and the loneliness and pretending everything is fine when I feel like I'm slowly disappearing." He stared at her, and for the first time she saw something crack in his careful composure. "You think I don't feel it too? This isolation. I've built a life where everyone wants something from me, where every relationship is transactional. You're the first person in years who's been honest about what this is." "This is a prison," Alexandra said quietly. "A gilded, expensive prison, but a prison nonetheless." "Then what do you want to do about it?" She didn't know. That was the problem. She was trapped by her own choices, by the contract she'd signed, by the family obligations she could abandon. "I don't know," she admitted. "I just know I can't keep doing this. Going through the motions, smiling for cameras, sleeping 3 feet away from you every night and pretending you don't exist." Adrian stood up, walking to the windows that overlooked the city. "We could try being friends." "Friends? We're going to be married for 10 more months. We work together. We live together. Maybe we should stop pretending we're strangers and actually get to know each other." "You want to be friends with me?" "I want to survive the next 10 months without losing my mind. Don't you?" Alexandra considered this. It was dangerous territory. Getting close to Adrian, letting down her guard, risking actual feelings in an arrangement that was supposed to be purely transactional. But the alternative was continuing this lonely existence, and she wasn't sure she could bear it. "Okay," she said finally. "Friends, but real friends. That means actual conversations, honesty, no more treating each other like business associates." "Agreed." He turned back to face her. "So, friend, tell me something real, something I don't know about you." Alexandra thought for a moment. "I wanted to be a marine biologist when I was a kid. I was obsessed with whales and dolphins. I used to make my parents take me to the aquarium every weekend." "What changed?" "My father. He said marine biology wasn't a serious career, that I had a responsibility to the family business. So I studied computer science and business management instead, and I put away childish dreams." She met his eyes. "Your turn. Tell me something real." Adrian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I haven't celebrated my birthday in 15 years." "Why not?" "Because it was the day my mother abandoned me at a fire station. I was 8 years old. She left a note saying she couldn't handle being a parent anymore, and she never came back." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Alexandra could see the pain beneath. I spent the next 10 years in foster care. Some homes were okay, most weren't. I learned early that the only person I could rely on was myself. Alexandra's heart clenched. She'd known the basics of his story, what the media reported, but hearing it from him was different. I'm sorry, that's horrible. It made me who I am. Taught me that sentiment and attachment are weaknesses. That the only thing that matters is being strong enough that no one can hurt you again. Is that why you're like this, so controlled and distant? It's worked well so far. Has it? Because you just admitted you're as lonely as I am. He didn't have an answer for that. They talked until almost midnight, sharing stories carefully at first, then with increasing honesty. Alexandra told him about the pressure of being the Laurent heir, the expectations that crushed her, the way her own dreams had been buried under family obligation. Adrian told her about building his company from nothing, the years of 80-hour weeks, the people who tried to destroy him along the way. By the time they finally headed to bed, something had shifted between them. They weren't enemies anymore. Maybe not quite friends yet, but something closer to real. That night when Alexandra climbed into bed, Adrian was already there, reading on his tablet. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for talking to me, for being honest. Thank you for asking." He set down his tablet. "We should do this more often, the talking." "I'd like that." "Good night, Alexandra." "Good night, Adrian." She fell asleep easier than she had in months. The friendship, tentative as it was, changed everything. They started having dinner together most evenings, talking about work and life and everything in between. Adrian showed her his favorite spots in the city, places he discovered during his years of isolation. She introduced him to classic movies he'd somehow never seen, and they'd watch them together on the massive living room screen. He was different when he wasn't performing for the public. Quieter, more thoughtful, occasionally funny in a dry, sarcastic way. He listened when she talked, really listened, and offered insights that were surprisingly perceptive. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, Alexandra stopped thinking of him as the enemy. 3 months into the marriage, they attended a company party. It was supposed to be casual, a celebration of Sterling Technologies landing a major contract. But as always with Adrian, appearances mattered. They arrived together, his hand on her back as they entered the venue. His employees greeted them warmly, and Alexandra found herself actually enjoying the conversations. She knew these people now, had worked alongside them, earned their respect. "You seem happy," Adrian murmured during a quiet moment. "I am actually. I like the work, I like the team. This feels real, not like a performance." "That's good. I want you to be happy here." Before she could respond, someone bumped into her from behind and she stumbled forward. Adrian's arms caught her immediately, steadying her, and suddenly they were much closer than they'd been before. "You okay?" he asked, his hand still on her waist. "Yeah, I'm fine, just clumsy." But neither of them moved. They stood there, pressed together in the crowded room, and Alexandra became acutely aware of everything about him. The warmth of his hands through her dress, the way he smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him, the gray of his eyes, which up close weren't quite as cold as she'd always thought. "Adrian," she whispered. "I know," his voice was rough, "we should move." "We should." But they didn't. They stood frozen, something electric passing between them, something that felt dangerously real. Then someone called Adrian's name, breaking the spell, and they stepped apart quickly. "I need a drink," Alexandra said, her voice shaky. "Me too." They separated, moving to opposite sides of the room, but Alexandra could still feel the ghost of his touch on her waist, could still see the look in his eyes in that moment before they'd pulled apart. This was dangerous. This was exactly what they'd agreed wouldn't happen. No feelings, no complications, just business. But her racing heart didn't seem to understand the distinction. Later that night, back at the penthouse, They moved around each other carefully, both aware of the shift, neither willing to acknowledge it. Alexandra was in the bathroom brushing her teeth when Adrian appeared in the doorway. Still in his dress shirt and slacks, tie loosened, looking tired and conflicted. "We need to talk about what happened tonight," he said. She rinsed her mouth, buying time. "Nothing happened." "Don't do that. Don't pretend you didn't feel it too." "Feel what, Adrian? We got too close in a crowded room, that's all." "Is it?" He stepped into the bathroom and the space suddenly felt much smaller. "Because I've been thinking about that moment all night, about how it felt to have you in my arms, about how much I didn't want to let go." Alexandra's pulse quickened. "We have a contract, rules. This is supposed to be business." "I know what it's supposed to be, but somewhere between hatting you and pretending to love you, something changed. At least for me." She wanted to deny it, to protect herself, to maintain the safe distance that kept her heart from breaking, but she was so tired of lying. "For me too," she whispered, "and it terrifies me." Adrian moved closer until they were inches apart. "It terrifies me too. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding this, avoiding vulnerability and attachment and anything that could hurt me. And then you walked into my office 2 months ago, desperate and proud and beautiful, and I've been fighting this ever since." "Fighting what?" "This." He cupped her face in his hands, his touch gentle. "The fact that I want you, not because of some contract or business arrangement, but because you challenge me and frustrate me and make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again." "Adrian, we can't." "I know we can't. I know all the reasons this is a terrible idea, but I need you to know the truth. I need you to know that somewhere along the way, this stopped being fake for me." Alexandra's eyes burned with unshed tears. "What are we supposed to do with that?" "I don't know, maybe nothing. Maybe we just acknowledge it and keep pretending, but I couldn't keep lying to you, not when we promised each other honesty." He dropped his hands and stepped back, leaving her cold and aching. "Good night, Alexandra." He left her standing in the bathroom, her heart pounding, her world tilted on its axis. Everything had just changed, and she had no idea what came next.